are listening to the Moody Girl podcast with me, Emily Fazer. Throughout this series, we're going to be opening the minds of experts and delving into the world of alternative healing methods. Hi Zoe, welcome to the Moody Girl podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. This is actually my first, I know we're in like end of March, but this is my first podcast appearance of the year.
Yay, 2023. Big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I came across your account because I was just like, first of all, I think your aesthetic is really, really cool. I think the way that you approach like quite serious topics, you've kind of got a really amazing way of portraying that online. And so that was kind of how I discovered you, and was instantly like, really love what you're doing. Yeah, I mean, kind of you portray yourself as like really confident and, like you've got your shit in order. Has it always been like that for you? Like, how did you get into coaching?
That's very sweet that it appears that I look like I've got my shit together. But I think like most people, everybody has got something going on. Like even coaches, I think there is actually like an illusion that coaches and therapists and self-help experts like have a upper hand on sorting their shit out in their life. And although like I see a difference in what I go through nowadays versus before I actually trained to be a coach and a psychologist, I definitely see a difference in how I handle situations and how I can like self-coach myself and work through certain things that come up, but my emotions still get super heightened. Shit still happens to me day in, day out. And sometimes at the start of it, especially, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I feel a bit erratic.
Yeah.
So I think that happens to everybody. But it is super hard, isn't it? Especially at the pressures of like social media, right? Because it always looks like there's lots of glossy things going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely like since I've done coaching, I'm able to manage situations for myself and like my friends and my family with a lot more ease. And I got into coaching actually, like before I was trained to be a coach, I was working in the creative events industry. So I was working with fashion, beauty, and lifestyle clients. And I started doing that because I really love being around people. I'm an extrovert. I get a lot of energy from being around groups, from being out at events. I need to be like quite stimulated. I also do need a couple of nights a week where I'm just not talking to anybody and I'm just sitting in front of the TV. But mainly I get a lot of my energy from being around people. And I went into events because I thought it looked cool. I thought it looked really fun. Anybody that works in events or has thrown apart their own birthday party, for example, knows that events are not glamorous, they are not fun. It's a lot of hard work. So I was working in that for a few years, and then I just wasn't feeling like as fulfilled as I thought I could be. I wanted to connect with people on a bit of a deeper level. And at the time when I was just questioning what I was doing, I was going out with my ex-boyfriend and he had a coach through work. So I was really fascinated by the fact that he would come out of these sessions and he'd be like super pumped and he'd be like, I know what I'm doing. I'm working on this week and then this next week. And I saw this like steady growth in him. And that really fascinated me. So I basically like started researching about coaching, following some coaches online, went to go get a coach myself. I couldn't really see anybody at the time because this is about 5 years ago. It's a lot more popular now. But back then I couldn't find a coach that kind of looked like me, sounded like me, and I felt relatable to. And although you don't need that necessarily, a good coach is a good coach. It does really help when the person you're sat and being quite intimate with has had they feel like a sense of they kind of get you. I think that's really important. So I kind of saw a bit of a gap in the market. I went to some training days, really loved the training days, and I thought, and I really was really good at it. And I thought, if there aren't people that like me who have access to coaches, then that's something that I want to create for people. So my journey started from there really, which was, yeah, about 5 years ago. And I did some coaching training, which was a year-long training, which was face to face. And I quit my events job because managing the events world and then also managing coaching training was a lot. So I got a job as an office manager, and then that role then developed over the next 3 years into head of culture. So then I was heading
Mm.
up the culture department for a global team of 140.
Wow.
And we had offices in UK, Paris, Hong Kong, and dotted around the US, mainly in New York. And then I was basically developing that role as I was developing my coaching business. And I was really transparent with that company. And I said, eventually I want to go and run my own business. And they were so supportive, which is actually the power of just being really honest with like your managers about your long-term plan.
Mm.
And they were like, look, we know we've only got you for maybe 2, 3 more years max. Let's just like get the most out of you as we can. You can use us to work on what you want to work on outside of this company, which actually then made me work like 10 times like 10 times harder.
I mean, that's
Um,
so refreshing to hear that, like that you were able to
yeah,
be that honest with your employer. It sounds incredible. Like, what a great relationship.
yeah, exactly. And like that was really refreshing. And that helped me develop actually a huge part of my business of how it is today. I actually messaged the CEO recently and my old boss, and I was like, just wanted to drop in and say, like, I'm really grateful for the opportunity and the freedom you gave me, because now I've got some retained, steady clients that focus on that culture consulting side that are so impressed with the work that I'm doing. And I only was able to do that because I developed it with you. So thank you so much. And, they were like, thank you so much for telling us. Like, of course, like we know you knew you were going to go on and do big things. And um, that really taught me actually that being really open and talking to people about what you're doing is super helpful, because you don't know how those people are going to be able to help you.
Mm.
Um, and by me really speaking from very early on, I was like, I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to run a coaching practice. I know what I'm going to do. Even before I even like registered my company, even before I actually really knew anything about business, like I'm going to be very real. But I was talking about that. I was talking to that into existence almost. And then people that understand different elements or are interested or want to help are then the people that come forward. And then that's how my business went from strength to strength, really, because you have to lean on a lot of people when you're running a business. So that was like my journey into it. And then I've just been developing the business, and it's got like a few different avenues. So I do my one-to-one coaching, where um I work with people who just feel a bit stuck,
Mm.
um or don't really know, they don't really feel like they know what's going on, and they don't really think that life is going how it should be for them. And then I work, I produce a lot of content. So I make content that just really helps people understand psychology, understands coaching, just try and give people as many tools as they can to help themselves. And then I have my culture consulting side, where I go into businesses and I consult on their business culture. So my business has got 3 different avenues, and I'm still developing it. There's still, still a long way for it to go. There's a lot of things I'm still wanting it to go into.
Mm.
Um, but it's definitely it's come a long way since the day which it actually started off as an Instagram page.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so refreshing. There's so many different parts there of like your story that I think are really refreshing and great to hear. Like, even as you say, like as somebody who portrays and has done a psychology degree, and the kind of ins and outs of how
Yeah.
minds work, but even you find it, challenging at times, and
Oh, yeah.
it crops up in ways. And like, I mean, even for myself, like on my own journey, like I'm constantly trying, to delve in and look at certain triggers, and work in therapy, and try all of these different things and holistic ways to heal myself, and reoccurring, I guess, patterns of behavior that keep cropping up throughout my life. But sometimes, no matter how much you try, and no matter how much growth you think that you've had, it will just like confront you in like the most abrasive way, and you're like in a situation. And I
Mm.
mean, for me, Moody Girl started because I can be very moody leading up to my period, to the point where like I will tell people to F off, in like a really, not good environment to do that. And especially like it would just come up and it would be like bam. And it
Yeah,
feels like all of that work that you've been doing is just like counteracting
yeah,
it. And so you go through this thing like, no, I have been doing good, but like, oh my God, it's just this cycle sometimes. So I think it's refreshing, and, especially for the audience and for myself as well, to hear that, we haven't got it figured out all the time.
mm. We never do, and honestly don't believe that you ever will. Like, it's just
Mm,
about getting a bit of a better understanding of how you react and working out what's best for you, which is the best way for you to react in that situation.
yeah.
Um, and that sometimes takes people biting their lip, which takes a lot of courage to do sometimes. It takes a lot of work to then think about the routines that you set into place, whether that's deep breaths, whether that's removing yourself from the conversation, whether that's getting vulnerable in the conversation. But life always throws so much at you. And I read this quote a few years ago, and I can't remember who it's by, but they said that the things that you worry about day in, day out are never usually the things that actually end up happening. It's the
Mm,
things that you never thought that were going to happen, which are the things that actually come into your life and cause a lot of concern. And I think that just shows that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen next week, next year. And as you grow, as you get older, as you're around different people, different things are happening in and out of your life, there are going to be experiences that happen to you that you never even thought of, or you didn't even know was a thing, right? So
mhm.
it's just knowing that there's beauty in knowing that there's something that's always going to come up. um that that feeling is always temporary.
Mhm.
And it's the same with happiness, right? Like, when we feel really happy and excited and things are going really well, that's actually also temporary.
Yeah.
Um, as is when something isn't going very well and we're feeling really low, that's temporary as well, because everything constantly changes. It's
Mm,
just about how you navigate when that happens. And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of, day in, day out persevering with that. Even in those moments when you just want to get into bed and pull the duvet over you and not talk to anybody, you know, there's pleasure in doing that. There's greatness in doing that for some parts, but then that you can't live your life like that, right? You have to be able to, you're put on this earth. You want to try and experience it and live the best life that you can. So it means that you have to put some of these routines into place. But I always say that it's a lot harder and it takes a lot more energy being in those spaces of not having a routine and not reacting and sitting in that place than it is actually putting these routines together and then focusing on yourself and trying to work really hard at trying to do better, even when you're faced with a lot of adversity.
yeah, I think it's the daily rituals as well. I think it's keeping that up, and it's like it is tough for sure. Like, I'm
Yeah,
doing like 21 days of abundance at the moment, where it's like,
yeah,
different challenges every night before bed, and then this meditation, and then remembering this mantra throughout the day. But I'm just like, my mind is
it's
like,
a
I
lot.
yeah, I just don't want to do this. Like, it's like actually rejecting it almost. But then it's like when you
Mm,
keep pushing each day, it becomes that little bit easier. And you do find that actually just a tiny bit each day does start to make a difference. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
it's so
probably like
true.
with anything, just giving yourself, even if you feel like crap and okay, you want to get under the covers. But if maybe you just say, okay, tonight I'm going to do 10 minutes of breath work before I do that, and like setting yourself just a small task, and then maybe
Yeah,
longer and longer. And I don't know, I know, especially for me, like if I'm in one of those moods, it's like really hard to get through. Um,
yeah.
but it's finding, I guess, yeah, some sort of way to get through that.
Yeah, and routines and rituals are great, but that's only like a tiny part of like self-care and mental health. Like there are so many core parts to people living in a way that is going to help their minds be healthy. And doing a ritual every night or routine every night, that isn't going to solve your mental health. That isn't going to solve you creating a self-care plan.
Hmm.
You have to have there's different areas and different hierarchy of needs that every single person needs to have a little bit of
Hmm.
to be able to have a to live towards that healthy mindset. That is from everything from how many hours sleep we get, how much exercise we do, the foods that we're eating, the job that we're in, the stress that we're under at that time, um, the people that we're around. There's so many different things that come into that, and it's a juggling act of making sure that you're tapping in or sprinkling a bit of water into each one of those.
Mm.
Just filling up all your time, your water. Think of your energy as water, and pouring that into just doing evening rituals and not actually doing the other work that comes with it. That isn't going to be sustainable. That might create some short-term changes. You might start to feel that you feel a little bit better, but that isn't going to help you long term. And long term is the main goal, because you have to try and create these routines that are sustainable.
Yeah, I feel like actually you describing that almost feels like, putting a plaster on a broken arm. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's very surface level. And if you're not kind of, I guess, listening to your gut feeling on certain areas of your life that aren't, working for you, but you're still trying to do these rituals every day, without addressing these things in your life, then it's not going, your mental health isn't, gonna be better. So that's, I think, a really amazing point, actually. And I think the way that you illustrated that is
Mm.
really digestible. And I hope you enjoyed that, audience, because I know I did. So for me, this might be a really silly question, but like, so my dad's New Yorker, born and raised. He's always been like mad keen on like go to college and like get a mentor and find a coach and all this sort of stuff. Because Americans are like really kind of, way ahead in terms of like self-help, self-care, look after yourself, everything's good, you got this. Um,
Yeah.
and I was going to ask, is there a difference between a coach and a therapist?
Yeah, and that's not a silly question at all. That's a really important question, because there are loads of professionals that sit under kind of an umbrella.
Mm,
Um, how I see therapy, and in my training, therapy very much looks back at the past, and it looks back at the things you've been through, the situations that have happened that have got you to where you are today, and have potentially created some anxieties, created some sort of depression, created some sort of heightened emotion in you. Trickling everything down to post-traumatic stress disorder and schizophrenia, everything to do with that. But any heightened emotions that you feel, so you might be feeling super low, have super low moods quite a lot of the time. You might be super anxious. You might be feeling quite triggered in situations. A therapist is fantastic for helping you really understand the complexities of that. Um, I'm not a therapist myself, so that's a very kind of baseline, top level, surface level description. But it's very much looking into the past of where you now are to help you move forward into the future and see what that could look like into the future.
mhm,
With coaching, we never look into the past, we're always looking forward. So we're looking at, okay, this is how you feel at the moment, this is how you want to feel, this is where you want to get to, this is where you see yourself, how do we get you from where we are now to where you want to get to? And
Mm,
some people don't understand maybe why they're feeling a certain way or what's come up for them. And that's okay, because that's what we do. We sit and we really digest and think about what's happening and help them work out, okay, so maybe you're not feeling as confident. Okay, let's see and let's work on how we can boost your confidence in a sustainable way. Okay, I'm
mm,
in a career and I really don't like it. How can I transition into that? Or, even down to, I'm trying to date and I'm finding it super hard. How can I meet somebody with some substance, right? And it's about, okay, so this is where you are now, and this is where we want to get you to. And that's why coaching is, if you've got a good coach, is very successful, because we're always thinking about, we're always thinking ahead. And as humans, we're very optimistic when we think about who we are in the future. We want better for ourselves. We think we're going to look better, sound better, have more money, be happier. um that's a natural part of being human. A coach is thinking, okay, this is how you see it. This is how you actually get to that point.
mm.
Because there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And like, I mean, because I've never had a coach. I've done therapy with two separate therapists now. Um and it is really good. But sometimes I almost feel like a little bit of like an emotional hangover, because you're like
Yeah,
revisiting a lot of stuff sometimes. And like, I am
yeah,
quite like a naturally forward thinking person in terms of like, okay, what are my goals? How am I going to get there? Without, as you say, sustainably. That's like, the key word, I think, in most situations is like, how are you going to do it where it's not detrimental to myself and,
mm,
people around me. So yeah, that's a really amazing description. You really summed that up for me. So thank you. I wanted to go into more of your work, into work culture.
yeah,
So this is something that I'm super fascinated in. 2022 was the year of the Great Resignation in the UK, and I am just constantly thinking this is because of lockdown. People were able to strip everything back. They were able to actually see life before their job. They were able to, not have FOMO of their friends, what they're up to. It was just like, okay, what do I want in my life? Um,
yeah,
and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, lockdown's over, back to it, back on the grind, back in the rat race. And then, people were just like, no, I'm not doing this. And I feel like there's more extreme stories coming out now of people like selling their houses, buying a van, doing it up, and like just living and driving around random countries, and, finding different ways and alternative ways to live life. And so, yeah,
yeah.
I want to hear more about how you go into businesses and like, what would you describe as a toxic work culture?
So I would describe a workplace that has a culture that is like negative and as you mentioned, toxic, is
Mhm.
usually a place where people feel like they can't raise concerns, or where they can't speak about the things that are maybe blocking them from doing the job that they're there to do. If they're in an environment where they feel like they can't offer suggestions, they can't bring ideas to the table, they can't talk about their feelings, or what's going on in their personal lives. um, they feel like they can't turn up as who they are. They feel like they've almost got to get to a door and either got to try and get through the day, or they feel like they have to put on some sort of business work persona, because they feel that if they are acting authentically themselves, then that's going to be discouraged in the workforce. And, that's quite like heightened toxicity. So that's where, there's bullying going on. That's where people aren't able to talk to their managers, or leadership don't have any buy-in. People being overworked, expectations are super high, and it isn't comparable to the capacities of people. Unfair pay, that also can feed into a negative and toxic work culture. And just a place that doesn't understand how important people are to the business. So, you know, you know, think of, if you think of your favorite brand in the world, um, about one of your favorite most successful brands in the world, they're an amazing, like that, they're an amazing brand. They've got to where they've got to because of the people that are in that company. And
Mm,
yeah, there might have been one person or a group of people that thought of the idea initially, but it's the people on the ground day in, day out that are the ones producing the work, that are the ones that are forming that company, putting those ideas out, getting things, producing things for that company, no matter what it is. And if you don't look after those people and truly believe that they are the most important asset to that company, then that is where you will start to see businesses not manage very well, become as profitable, um, and companies that don't believe that people are the center point are the companies that typically will start to show more toxic like behaviors. You also have like lowercase toxicity, so you'll have, there might be some smaller bits of toxicness that are happening, and that can be from you know, having a negative manager, or having a manager who micromanages you,
mm,
or you know, you never meeting the CEO or seeing the CEO speak, or the CEO never kind of communicating. That's kind of smaller case toxic behaviors. And if there's enough of them, they can start building into that kind of that capital T toxic, that I just mentioned initially.
mm. Okay. And like, when you go into a company, and I
Yeah.
mean, where do you even start? Like, if you go into somewhere and it's just like, holy crap, like there's so much to work on here. Like, are there
Yeah.
like five, or like, I don't know, what are like the pillars that you say, okay, this is like unbalanced, or I can see there's huge, issues there. Like, how do you spot that? Do you like have to go into the company and, I guess, have like surveillance, like the super nanny did back in the day?
Yeah. So I always start with the people. So I always ask the people how they're feeling. Uh, I'll send out a survey that is a really in depth. You know, I've got about 35 questions in the survey, which really help me understand how people are feeling. That survey is completely anonymous. Um, I don't know who it's come from. Um, and I analyze all of that data, and then I pick out the trends and I say, okay, this is a trend that's happening here. This is the thing that's happening. And then I look at how the business is structured. So what sorts of things are happening day in, day out. I spend a lot of time in leadership. I understand the leadership roles. So I'll understand personality types. And then I'll spend, depending on the size of the company, like I'm working with a company at the moment, who there's around 35 of them. So I'm able to have a one-to-one conversation with every single person. When I'm working with larger companies at 140, then that is not as manageable.
Mm,
But where I can, I will speak to everybody face to face, and I'll get a real sense for what they're saying and then what their body language is actually saying.
mm,
Um, and it's really useful having a culture consultant, right? Because I'm very much a part of their company. I'm an add-on to them, an add-on to their team. I'm there to ultimately help the business grow in profitability. But
mm,
my real aim is that I believe that everybody should enjoy the work that they do, no matter what their role is.
mhm,
And I think that I don't think actually, I believe thoroughly that businesses have a responsibility. If they are forming a company that they want to hire people, they have a responsibility to really look after those people. And that's not just on an individual level helping that business, that also then affects society, because we need to be trying to grow society. And if you've got a group of people, that's a really, really great way of you then having a ripple effect on helping society. Because if you're helping those people, supporting those people, making those people feel psychologically safe, then that's going to then have a ripple effect on the people they communicate with in society, whether that's their friends, their family, strangers, right? So it has a huge ripple effect.
mm.
Um, and businesses have a responsibility for that. And also, we spend so much time in work. Like, why would you not want to go into work and be able to enjoy it? Just because you've got a company that has, maybe I see a lot of companies who have a lot of responsibility. They have a lot of, things, investors. They have a lot of people really relying on them for certain things. So then the stress level goes up, right? The stakes are really high. However, we might as well try and enjoy that time that we're there when we're creating whatever they're creating.
Mm.
Um, so I work with businesses in that aspect when I'm trying to help them, but also on that personal level of, let's just try and make this place as fun as it can be. And I don't expect people to hop, skip, and a jump coming to work every day or when they open their laptop, but they need to know that when they're opening that laptop, that they feel psychologically safe with the company that they're working for. And then from the business side of it, the key is to making people feel emotionally attached to the product or service that they're selling.
Mhm.
Um, that's the two core parts of uh, developing a healthy culture.
Mm.
And that is, working with people to working with leadership, working with managers, working with the wider teams to be able to facilitate those types of behaviors to help that. And then it's also about helping people really feel attached to that product so that they are going in there selling that product, selling that service.
Mm. I think it's really good the way that the world and the way that the work kind of cultures are evolving, and like especially with job ads now, it's way more transparent in terms of like pay brackets and benefits packages, because quite quickly you know you can see the red flag straight away when it's some of the benefits are just like standard things that shouldn't even be put on as the benefits of the company. So I feel like things are
Yeah.
like finally moving in that direction. But I mean, like, I am 33 now. I got into my first post-grad job was like working for an advertising company where, like it's all about working late shifts. It's like almost like who stayed later, who's worked harder. Like, I was like an office manager. There was like 5 different companies within it. It was like I literally could ask someone to like cover the desk for me while I went to the toilet and then would come back. And that was like my life, and it was intense, but it was like, yeah, this
Mm,
is like what work is about. Like you work really hard, work, and then like you get rewarded, and then like you get another position, and then you work. And it's like been something throughout my life that's like that's my introduction into work culture. um and
mm,
so that's something that I find so fascinating now, like, more with me, like say Gen Z, where it's like actually they probably won't stand for maybe what I would have stood for straight, post grad, because I was just like, deer in the
yeah.
headlights and was just like, this is just what it is. Like no one else is talking about how great their work culture is. So like
Yeah.
you just suck it up and you get on with it. I mean, I had friends who did internships for like literally next to nothing, and same as me as well. I think I did like an internship for like quite a big magazine in London, and worked my ass off, and at the end they were just like, yeah, sorry, we don't actually give references. And I was just like, well, what's the point? Like I didn't know that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's like this whole kind of introduction to like quite a nuts work environment, and it was because I was getting into the creative side of things, and I think you know it's so competitive to get into those environments. So I think like back in the day it was just like, yeah, you can be an intern but you do it for free and we'll just give you like lunch money, and it's just like
Yeah.
it's crazy. So I mean, like, I feel like my life's evolved quite extensively since that. But
Mm,
for anyone listening who is in a situation, I know you said you like work with a lot of people who feel particularly stuck in their life. Um,
mm,
so for anyone who's like, finding their environment quite toxic, we've all got to pay the bills
yeah.
somehow. And, sometimes it's really hard to see out of that situation because it's so real. Um,
Mm,
And for anyone who's out there listening now, if you're feeling stuck, if you're in a toxic work environment, Zoe, what would be your, advice for those people?
When it, like you mentioned, is hard, right? Because especially when you have financial responsibilities and you want your career to, you thought your career was going to go in a certain direction, and it's not, it can be super disheartening. And I'd say that there's two sides of it. So it's definitely not taking it personally. There's been so many jobs that have not worked out well for me. And I'm now in a position where I'm running a successful company, right? And there's lots of other stories out there like that. So not taking that toxic workplace personally to who you are, to the work that you're doing. And if you're wanting to get out, it's about just setting up a plan of how that's going to happen, and set yourself many goals. I always encourage people to think small. So think in small baby steps, because someone saying, I want to move into and get a new career or move into a new company, that can feel like a huge job, right? But it's about breaking it down and thinking, okay, I want to be out of this company within 2 months. I don't think I can handle it for much longer, right? So then you're thinking, okay, I've got 2 months. How many hours per week can I dedicate to finding a new job? Does that mean that I take some holiday to really kickstart it? Use the holiday that I'm given, right? What can you be doing each week to move you closer to that goal? And
Mm,
also speaking to people around you, like the and I mentioned this at the beginning, but the power of community is crazy. If you want to be in a new space, in a new work environment, speak to your friends, tell your friends, I can't handle this work environment anymore. I want to move somewhere new. Where do you work? What's that like? Do you know anybody that works in recruitment? Do you know anybody that works in X, Y, and Z? Speak to people, even if you're chatting to people in the coffee shop, right? When they ask you, how you doing today? Oh, I'm trying to find a new job at the moment. Like, the power of having that conversation, you don't know who that person knows. You don't know who's standing behind you in the queue. You don't know who overheard you talking about that, and bringing that into existence that you want to move. It's super hard if you want to stay in that role and you want to change the culture. Like, single-handedly trying to change a culture isn't going to happen. You need buy-in from every single level. It's a big old job if that's what you want to
mhm,
do.
mhm,
But, raising those concerns with your manager, raising it with people that you feel really trusting of in the company, raising it with them. If you keep thinking you're hitting a brick wall, then that might be the time where you decide that, actually, even though I love this company or this brand, is it worth my mental health? Is it worth the stress that I feel like I'm under? And we have to be really careful around being in having traumatic experiences, because trauma and toxicness takes a long time to get over.
mm,
And it takes a lot of work to get out of some of the habits that those companies will put on you,
mm,
or will make you believe that you are. So a toxic work environment, like when you're in a toxic relationship, it can start to make you feel that you're the problem. And that can take a long time. That can take a lot of work to start making you feel confident and own your shit again. So you have to think about yourself first. But yeah, try and talk to people within the company. If you feel like you're hitting a brick wall, it's okay. This is just keep telling yourself it's temporary. Make sure you've got somebody to talk to outside of work that you can kind of lean on. However, if you are finding that you're talking about work consistently outside of work and kind of venting a lot, then you need to start bringing that back, because it's also not fair to vent a day in, day out to everybody around you. Find a channel that you can vent on your own. Maybe that's journaling, and then having, one or two people who you really trust that you can then call and speak to. Obviously, if you've got professional help, that's amazing, because they'll be able to help you in a professional way. And then start setting those goals. I've got a goal that I want to be out in 3 months. What does that look like week in, week out? maybe the first 2 weeks is you looking at your CV. Maybe the week after that is adding lots of people on LinkedIn, networking on LinkedIn. Then the week after, maybe that is you then applying for lots of jobs. The week after that, you're going to leave space and time for you to be interviewing, and see how that process goes. And also, if you're able to, there's also power in sorting out your finances at that point and thinking, how much can I save over the next 2 to 3 months, that if I can't find a job in that time, that it will buy me a bit more time, but I can still maybe hand my notice in. So just always thinking about your get out plan.
I really like the way that you dissect everything into small chunks.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely somebody who looks at the end goal and then freaks out and is like,
Yeah.
how the heck am I going to get there? Do you know what I mean? And that's like with so many different parts of life.
Yeah.
And my husband will say to me, Emily, let's just like take it, you're thinking about everything at once here. Let's just try and like reel it back a bit. But the way that you explain that, and I do really feel that for anyone who is listening, who is in the situation where they might be in a toxic work environment, that is so digestible, and so achievable when you put it like that. It's like, yeah, first week look at the CV, second week do the LinkedIn, adding, and it's like, yeah, of course I can do that, that's easy.
Yeah, and really break it down and think, okay, look at realistically, maybe your job is 8 till 6, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to, then you've got, I don't know, hobbies, you've got friends, you've got partners, whatever. Okay, so actually look at your diary and think, how much time do I actually realistically have? Okay, maybe I've only got 2 hours on a Saturday. Is that going to get me a new job, 2 hours a week for the next 2 months? Potentially, potentially not. What then can I sacrifice over the next month? And maybe I don't do that on that evening, or maybe I make sure I don't go out on the Friday night, or only go out one night on the weekend, so that I can get up really fresh and spend 4 hours a week. Or, maybe I could fit in 2 hours on a Tuesday, and really think about your own schedule. Because what often happens is we think, yeah, okay, I'll do 1 hour on a Monday, 1 hour on a Tuesday. And after the weekend, I know Mondays, I just want to go home, either go to the gym and not talk to anybody, or go home and watch TV. So factor that in. That's okay that maybe on a Monday your energy is really low. So your time probably isn't best spent looking at a job, right? You don't have to work at 100 hours, 100 miles an hour every single day. Pick that Tuesday where you've got a bit more energy, or a Wednesday, right? A couple hours on a Saturday, and then work out what you can do within those few hours and keep working like that, and review it, right? So review it in 3 weeks' time and look back and think, yeah, I've got loads done. This time's working. Or, actually, I'm nearly there. Maybe I can get my Tuesday night back. Or actually, this is nowhere near enough time. What else can I do? Maybe I need to book in, a week's holiday or something next month, so that I actually can just spend the whole week focusing on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing, honestly. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So we spoke about helping others with, a toxic environment. What do you do for yourself? Like, do you have routines, that you stick to day, like when you're in that situation where you're working in events, you kind of knew that wasn't authentically, who you wanted to be, you wanted to get a bit deeper in terms of, where you were at and your work. How did you make sure that you did that? So I know that you said you kind of looked into different studying, and there was a lot that went into that, of course, but in terms of like your daily routine and making sure that you were reaching that goal, essentially.
So I only really started getting into like self-help and coaching and therapy and daily rituals when I actually started training. Up until that point, my life was very much on survival mode.
Wow.
There was a lot of like trauma that I didn't really know was trauma. I was living in a way that I was almost like chasing the day, like, okay, when will today be over so then I can get on with tomorrow? And okay, I've got this booked in for this weekend. Okay, then when that's over, then Monday will come around. Like that was very much my mindset. So I didn't really have too many routines per se at that point that I can really remember. I was also super young, like, you know,
Mm.
I was in my like early mid 20s. I started training to be a coach when I was like 27, I think, 27, 28. So a lot of the time up until that point, which is most people, you're still trying to work out what the hell is what's happening in life. And
Yeah.
um, you know, like our prefrontal cortex, which is the part that helps you make decisions, that's your personality, it's your memories, that helps you decide and take control of your emotions. That actually doesn't develop until you're 25.
Wow.
So it doesn't fully develop till you're 25, which means that up until that point, it's super hard for any brain to navigate situations. And we have to make a lot of big decisions up until you're 25. A lot of people are deciding what careers they want. A lot
Mm.
of people are living with family where there's certain situations that are potentially going on that they can't navigate. So where a lot of people pick their partners in that time, their first relationships or second relationships, there's a lot of big decisions that go up into that point. And the fact that our brains aren't even fully developed until we're 25 means that we're actually making very irrational decisions and we're being very irrational emotionally. So I think I was just had trauma from when I was younger, never really was sure what I wanted to do, never really had support in terms of that. And I was just generally being a 25-year-old, you know, early 20s, mid 20s. It wasn't until I was doing my coaching training and then a couple of really big things happened in my life when I was about 26 that really knocked me.
Mm.
And I remember feeling really shit and thinking this is not normal that I feel this shit. And obviously, normal is, you know, a very complex word, but it's not typical for me to feel this erratic. And I made it my mission from that point onwards to learn as much as I could about self care, about therapy, about psychology, because I genuinely, for myself, did not want to ever want to feel that shit again.
Mm.
And I didn't ever want to feel as not in control as I felt. So my routines have actually really only developed over the last 3.5 years. And they've really taken a while. It wasn't that I found one thing and that was me set. Like I've really had to try and try again. And I'd say over the last year, I've really started to nail stuff.
Mm.
Um, and but I'm always developing them. So that's just a bit of a backstory. But my daily routines have then developed into the gym is one of my like the core things that I do. Um, Working out, whether that's you work out at home, sometimes I work out at home, sometimes I go to a gym. That has been one of the biggest things that has really, really helped my mental health. It's helped my mood. I notice when I don't go to the gym, so I try and go about 3 or 4 times a week. And if I don't go, then I really notice my mood dip. So that's been a huge lifestyle change for me because I used to hate the gym. I used to be like, I would never be a gym goer. I find it so boring. But now it's like a huge part of my lifestyle. And so that's a huge thing. I have quite a strict evening routine. So in the week, on the weekends, it's very different. But in the week, I very much try and like wind down for about 9, try and get into bed. I have a candlelit shower. I used to have a bath every night, but
Mm.
the bath in my new flat isn't very comfortable. So now I have a candlelit shower.
That sounds
Again, that's
amazing.
me. That's me like adjusting my routine. And I take time doing my face routine and then I sit in bed and I read a book, or I'll sit there and I'll just check in on my day. So I ask myself how I am. I'll ask myself how I've been feeling that day. If something annoyed me, if something's made me angry, if something's made me really happy, I just ask myself some questions about that.
Mm.
Um, I also do a lot of gratitude work in that time. So I list a few things in my head that I'm grateful for.
Mm.
So those things have really helped, and they're definitely in my daily routine. And like I said, it's not always perfect, right? Like if I stay at my boyfriend's house, then I don't really sit there and catch up on my day, right? Because I'm spending time with him. Or if I'm out on the weekend or I'm having a late one and I don't come home and I don't make sure that I do all of that. But I try and do that in the week, which has really helped me. And I eat a lot of fruit, which has actually like really changed. Like it's I really notice a difference when I've had really healthy food one day, how I feel the next day.
Mm.
And if I've ate a lot of fruit, then I feel really good. So now another one of my rituals is getting like at least one fruit pot down me a day.
Mm.
So they're my main rituals, but then on like a wider scale, it's around, I have a coach myself because I find it really useful, but I also have to because of my practice. I don't have therapy anymore because I felt like I got to a point where I'd really sorted out a lot of the trauma I'd been in, but I still have her email address, I still have her number. And if
Mhm.
I am feeling heightened emotions, then I will message her and we'll have like an ad hoc session.
Yeah.
Um, and keep myself fit. I am always asking myself how I'm feeling, always checking in with myself. And really importantly, I'm very careful about who I like let into my space in my life.
Mm.
Um, as an extrovert, it's very hard because I'm very used to just being like, yeah, let's do this, we can do this, and spending like time with lots of different people. And although I loved that part of me and very open, I have a lot of friends, really fortunately, there were probably a lot of situations or friends that I'd got myself into that weren't the healthiest.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've had to learn and I find really hard, um, because I'm very much like bring everyone, invite everybody, I'll speak to anybody. So that's been a huge shift for me as well because I have to think, okay, let me just slowly get to know this person
Mm.
and see, not test them, but it's really understanding like, do our values align? Am I going to want to spend time with that person? Um, am I going to want to absorb their energy?
Mm.
Um, and that means that, my circles have got smaller, but it means that, my health has got bigger. Um, and that's a really important thing as well, it's just being really careful with who you let into your intimate space anyway.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, like, same. I'm still kind of unsure. Like, in certain situations, I do feel extroverted, but since COVID, I've kind of seen like a real introverted side of myself, which
Yeah,
I'm really kind of like nurturing. Um,
yeah,
and yeah, I mean, the older I get, the more it's like it is that kind of, you'd hear your parents say it like, I can count my friends on one hand, and you're just like, yeah, whatever, like loser sort of thing. And then
yeah,
like as you get older, you're like, oh shit, like actually that is becoming my life and the people that I want to share my most intimate feelings and see the most raw side of who I actually am.
mm,
And also I've found as well, this is something that I talked to one of my best friends about. You really know the people that don't have your back when things are going well. So like
mm,
it's all well and good being like, yeah, yeah, okay, you're feeling down. Everyone kind of wants to like be that person who makes someone else feel better because it makes them feel good. But it's like sometimes I find it's quite confronting when something goes right for you and you're really excited to share it with a friend, and it's like the reaction can be like so crushing when it's like, oh, like why are you not happy for me, and I
mm,
think that's all like encouraging, like yeah, like absolutely, like go out and do something creative if that's what you want to do. Like it might be completely like a huge pipe dream, but go and do it. Like I'm supportive, you're my best friend, like absolutely,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
the
it's so
I feel
true.
like that's where I'm at now, where I'm like, I want to be around people that like pick you up when you're feeling creative and inspired, but also like when you're down, they can be there for you as well. But it's not
Yeah,
like this kind of feeling that like, oh yeah, I feel like maybe they're pissed off at me because I'm doing well. And then you start like
mm,
thinking, oh, am I portraying myself in a weird way? Or, and so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's so multifaceted in terms of like how you grow with friends and like whether you grow together and whether your like morals are still aligned or whether you are just literally at one point they were aligned. But then now it's like,
Mm,
shit, we're really not the same people anymore. And that's quite
yeah.
confronting. Like the older you get, it's just like, oh, okay, right. We're really not.
Yeah, and it's sad, right? And I
Yeah.
think that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to miss somebody, but it's also okay to actually have to move on, and the beauty of moving on is that then you have more opportunities to meet people that are of similar interest of you at that time, because we
Yeah.
always change, and it gives you then the opportunity to meet other people and bring other people into your life. And you know sci- statistically our groups do get smaller because, well, as we get older, because usually, because what happens is we're in a family dynamic for so many years typically, and then a lot of our a lot of our communication is with our parents and our caregivers, and then we get to a certain age where we don't want to spend, where we're starting to understand other people's emotions and other people's behaviors, and we then want to start spending more time with them. Then we drift away from family, and we don't spend as much time with families. We have all this extra time to spend with friends, and then typically as people get older, people start coupling up and they start forming their own families, and then they reconnect with their families again. So then there's less time for that friendship, and that means that people who are not as close, there's not enough time, there's not enough capacity in this person's life to be keeping up with you. But it's super important to keep good friends around you, and also keep your mind open to meeting new people and bringing new people in your life. And my mum's 67, and she met who's now her best friend 3 years ago, and they do everything together now,
Aw,
and they're very sweet, they're very cute together, and they know they've got each other's backs, and they talk all the time, and they see each other a couple of times a week. And my mum literally met her 3 years ago, so
I love that. It's
yeah.
so, so
and that's like
cute.
the and that's the beauty in it, right? You don't know what sorts of friends you're going to have, and you don't know who you're going to meet and what they're going to bring to your life. So there's also positives in that,
Totally.
losing some friendships.
Totally. And I also think like I've had it before where I've like, got to a situation with friends where maybe we've grown out of each other. Maybe we're at different stages in our lives at that point. You go on, you live your life, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that friend reaches out, or oh, actually something's reminded me of that friend. Let me reach out.
Yeah,
And then it's like actually we're at the same place again. And
yeah,
it can
exactly.
fluctuate. And I think, yeah, I never close the door like on friends. And I've always kind of like feel, quite positive and I guess like gratitude for the friendships that we once had and hopefully can continue moving forward. But yeah, I guess it's just constantly evolving. Like we as people are constantly evolving, and it's unrealistic to expect that you're going to be on the same page with the same group of people for the rest of your life. You know,
Mm,
everyone's situations are changing on a daily basis, whether it's their family, whether it's a relationship, whether it's their children, whether it's their job, and it's going to
yeah,
spark triggers in like either one of you in those situations. So again, there's no like, right or wrong way of dealing with those situations. It's just, I guess just trying our best.
yeah, exactly, trying our best, life
That's
motto.
yeah. Okay, so I've got one more question for you, and then I've also got some questions from the audience.
Nice.
So to end on, from me, what would you say? What would you say real growth looks like?
I feel that real growth looks like you can look back at situations, or you can look at yourself in the moment, in your present self, and say and understand the things that, if you think about the past, the things that you could have done better, and that maybe you didn't show up as well as you could do, and really pick out the toxic parts of you, or the negative parts of you, or where you just didn't react in a way that was a nice way to react. And you can look at that, and you can also look into the moment that you're in, and think, okay, I've got this part, this is going, this feels like it's nice, this feels like it's going well, I like myself in this part, but these are the elements that I want to grow, and these are the elements that I know that I need to improve on.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so audience, I asked you some questions for you to ask Zoe. I have got 4, and so I'm going to start with the first one. All anonymous. I often find myself feeling intimidated in larger groups and worried that people don't find what I'm saying very interesting. How do I change the narrative surrounding this?
I work with a lot of people who have this feeling. And it's interesting because then I'm thinking that most, I'd say I'd say 3/4 of all these large groups, people must be feeling exactly the same, which is this question. Um, I, there's lots of different angles to this, but what I would say is that people really like talking about the things that interest them, right? And there's a perception that we need to be super interesting, that we need to know everything to become across smart or to come across an interesting person. You don't actually need to know anything about anything. All you have to do is be able to have the ability to say to somebody who's talking about something interesting, "Oh, I've never heard of that before. Can you tell me a bit more?" That will make you come across as an interesting person, because you are being interesting, because you're asking somebody to talk about what they're talking about in a little bit more detail. So if you're ever in a space where people are talking about something that you have no idea about or have no interest in, but you're in that space and you're in a social environment and you want to be included in that conversation, just start asking people questions. "Oh, how did you learn about that? How long have you been into that? How did you get into that? Oh, I didn't really understand what you meant when you said X, Y, and Z. Can you explain it? Can you explain it a little bit more?" That's a really good questions you can prep before you're going into these situations. And also keeping a list of all the things that you bring to a table, right? And build that list up, keep it in notes in your phone or wherever is easily accessible, and start writing all the things down that you really like about yourself. If you find that really hard, speak to somebody who you really trust, who you really love, who you've got quite a nice trusting relationship with, and say to them, like, "I'm creating this list of things that I like about myself, that I bring to conversations, that I bring to friendships. Can you just tell me a couple of things that you think I bring?" Right? Add that to the list. And anytime you're about to be in a social situation, just check that list. And
Mm.
it'll give you a little bit of a little like pop of confidence. And it will remind you of all those things that actually you are going to bring to that conversation, or you are going to bring um to that situation. And thirdly, I'd say, as we were talking about earlier, friendships change. We are forced to make friends with the people in our facilities when we're in school, when we're in college, when we're in university. We change a lot. Sometimes our interests change, and that's okay. Think about what these people, if you're in a lot of the same social situations, and they're talking about things that you really don't have any interest in, then what you need to do is work out what you find interesting and try and find groups of friends or people that are going to be doing those sorts of things, right? So maybe you've got a friendship group, which I see a lot, who, their main thing is going out a lot, but actually you don't really find that interesting anymore. And you find, I don't know, netball, say, really interesting. Or finding something that you do find interesting, do a bit of research into yourself, go to events that start going to netball, start going out to the people in netball, start going to the pub with them after, start then building up friendships in the interest like groups that you're in. It doesn't mean you have to get rid of the friendships that you're already in, because it just means that when you fancy a night out, call them lot. When you fancy going out on a Saturday and doing something different, you call this person who you've met through this topic. So always ask people in conversations when you don't know what they're talking about. Ask them questions about it. Tell them you don't know. Tell them you want to know a bit more. Ask them how they learned about that. Keep a list of things that you really rate about yourself, that you know that you're going to bring to the table, and also then start looking for different places that you can find groups of friends with similar interests to you.
Amazing. Thank you. I actually learned loads from that myself. So
Good.
thank you for whoever asked that one. Okay, second one. I'm finding no matter how many positive affirmations and meditation I do to help my confidence, at certain points in the month, the negative self-talk seeps back in. How do I avoid this?
You don't avoid it. You never will avoid it. We have to keep things real. Just to give you a bit of an idea, we have between 6,000 to 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. 85% of them are negative, and 13% of them are repetitive from yesterday. So we developed this in our DNA to protect us, because we had to think that potentially everything we heard was going to be a negative thing. So, way back when we were in tribes, we developed this skill almost to keep us alive. So when we heard something in the distance, we had to think really negatively about what that could be, because then that was going to protect us. We still have that many thoughts today. We still have that high percentage of 85% of those thoughts being negative, and that is the sole purpose of trying to keep you alive. Now, our brains haven't developed as quickly as society has developed and environments have developed in the Western world. Most of us aren't under immediate danger like we were back then. So our minds are still working and processing in this way. So we have negative thoughts because they keep us alive. Positive affirmations are fantastic, but we also need to spend time on understanding what those negative thoughts are saying. We don't want to just push them down and distract ourselves. That's not healthy. That's not long-term sustainability for your mental health. Start writing down the negative thoughts that you have. Write them down and ask yourself questions about them. So whatever that negative thought is, follow. I always say it's like a thread. There's always a thread. There's a negative thought, and then that thought is attached to it is a long thread, and there's lots of different facets to that thread. There's lots of different things that are going on, and usually at the bottom of that thread lies a bit of an answer. So you might have negative self-talk about the way that you look, right? Ask yourself, okay, how come I don't like the way I look? When did that start? What do I like about myself? When does this thought seem really intrusive? What's happening there? Who am I around? It's around a particular time of month, like this person has asked. Okay, what's happening around that particular time of month? What can I do to make myself feel a little bit better? Who can I involve in that? And keep asking yourself, almost self-coaching yourself, and just try and explore that negative thought a little bit more, because it's just popping up because of fear. And it's just popping up because it's scared about something. And all you have to do is try. And I know it sounds really simple, and I know it's very complex, but all we're trying to do is understand what those negative thoughts are trying to say. And it's just us and our minds the rest of our lives. You can have partners, you can have family, you can have friends who are going to come in and out of your life. But the thing that you're always going to have is your mind. And we have to really try and make our mind a really nice place to be. We're on the same team. You have to think of your negative thoughts and your positive thoughts, that they're on the same team. You both want the same thing. You both want to live an okay life. How do we make sure we team those thoughts up? How do we give the negative thoughts a bit more confidence? How do we understand them a little bit more rather than pushing them away? It's really great giving positive thoughts a lot of limelight and, positive affirmations, but we really need to understand where those negative thoughts are coming from, because as soon as you start writing them out, their power goes away dramatically. And that's when you can start thinking of solutions to those thoughts.
Wow, that was beautifully answered. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, next up. I want to push myself, but find I am staying in my comfort zone a lot. How do I push these boundaries?
So our comfort zone feels like our comfort zone is like this small circle, and then everything else is outside of that. But all you're having to do is basically grow that that comfort zone, right? You're just pushing it a little bit, day by day, week by week. And what you'll start to do is, once you start challenging yourself, like we said earlier, with like the small baby steps. So this is my comfort zone at the moment. In a month's time, I wanna, I don't know, I don't know what, obviously this person is talking about, but if it's about making new friends, or being able to talk to new people, comfort zone at the moment is going to an event and not talking to anybody and sitting on your phone. That's your comfort zone. In a month's time, what would be growth? Okay, so in a month's time, I want to be able to go to an event and not get my phone out at all. That's all you have to focus on for the next month. What does that look like over the next 4 weeks? How many events am I going to? How can I, in these small baby steps, work up to that point? Maybe that means that you start practicing some questions that you can ask people, or you just practice and get really familiar with just standing on your own and not getting your phone out, right? So maybe you need to just test that out a little bit. Maybe the first event you go to that you do, you try and do that for 20 minutes and not get your phone out. And then the next time, the next week, or the next event you go to, you try and do it for an hour. Then you get to a point where you just don't get your phone out for the whole of the event per se, right? That's the small baby steps I'm talking about. Then you get to that end of that month point and you think, okay, where am I? What have I learned? What can I do now? Okay, then the next month, I want to have smiled at somebody and made eye contact with somebody. Okay, so how can I start over the next few events I'm going to? How can I start to build that up? What does that look like? They're the small baby steps. And then your comfort zone is going to start getting a little bit bigger each and every time. And you don't need to, within a week, go to that event and speak to 10 people and leave with 10 numbers or whatever, or, you just have to think about the next step, baby little step. Your bigger goal is obviously to be able to talk to people at events. That's okay. That might be a year away, but that's okay, because you're going to sustainably get to that point. Give yourself patience. And as soon as that comfort zone is just going to start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And but it's about you challenging yourself in those really small, easy wins.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, we've got the final question from the audience. What steps can you suggest if you want to change your career, but you don't have the funds to do a course or take a pay cut?
I definitely say start talking to your managers and see what training opportunities are available at the current company. Obviously, it's super hard if you want to move companies, depending on what relationship you have with your boss. Some bosses, like my boss, for example, and the company I was working at, were really supportive of that. I had to test the waters with it, obviously. So test the waters, see what type of training you can get within the current company, and then go and research what training you actually need to do and how you can develop your training. So there are so many free courses that will get you started. And again, start talking to as many people as you possibly can about the fact that you want to move. And you can even, depending how confident you feel with it, you can say to people, I really want to move, but I can't afford this course, I can't afford to take a pay cut. Speak to as many people as you can and just get as much advice that you can. And there are also, there are places that do give funding for some type of course and training, so also look into that. But definitely start with what you've got, start with where you are, speak to your managers, tell them you want to progress, tell them you want to do some training, and see what opportunities you have at your current company.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Zoe. And I hope whoever
You're
submitted those
welcome.
questions found those really useful. I mean, I found them really useful. So thank you so much.
Good.
Yeah, I really am super interested in coaching now. And one last question for me, actually.
Yeah, of course.
Do you think it's is it like a natural kind of progression to figure everything out past wise in therapy and then go to coaching, or can you do it side by side? Or is it kind of just whatever works for you, I guess?
It's whatever works for you. There's never, one size fits all. Um, as I mentioned, we discuss quite different things within within a coaching setting than we do with therapy. there's lots of clients that I have, and I know lots of my fellow coaches have clients who are doing both at the same time, and that's really beneficial because you're kind of in one space and you can talk about how you're feeling and getting yourself emotionally better, and then you can also then come in, then you're moving into another space and think, okay, so I've got all of this information about myself, now I know that I want to take it to here. How can you help me and plan for me to get to that point?
Mm.
So there's no one size fits all. What I always recommend though is find some coaches you like the look of, check their credibility, because you don't actually legally need to have any coaching training to be a coach, but I highly advise that you speak with somebody who has done some sort of training, and just book in some calls with them. So, you know, a lot of coaches like myself, we do free taster sessions. Book that call in, get the vibe, speak to what that coach could potentially bring you. You can tell them what's going on for you. They can tell you how they can support you, and then you can just take it from there. But speak to, you know, speak to a handful of coaches and just see which one you just feel a vibe with.
Amazing. So what I'm going to do at the end of this, Zoe, I'll put all of your social handles, websites. So anyone who's
Okay.
listening, if you'd like to reach out to Zoe and get some coaching or find out more and have a taster session, all of the handles will be in the bio of this episode. So thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been amazing speaking to you, hearing more about your story and just your way of describing, I don't know, just you illustrate everything so well. And
Oh,
for
thank
me,
you.
I feel like I've learned loads. And I really hope if there's anyone out there who feels like they needed this conversation, I really hope it helped you today. So thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so lovely. And yeah, you've been a great host, and I really enjoyed what we've kind of come up with. And it's so interesting having these conversations because even in the moment, you start thinking about things in different capacities. So it's also super useful for me. But yeah, anybody that wants to have a chat, is more interested in coaching, then just give my page a follow. You can book a free taster session with me via the link on my bio. Or if you just want to slide into the DM and just chat, just feel free, because the community we're building is just a real safe space that people can just come and just talk up with me and talk amongst themselves about what's going on for them, which is so important in society at the moment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so,
Yeah,
so much.
you're
Take care and have
welcome.
a
And
wonderful
you.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.